Hello.
Hello.
Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you really well.
Great.
Good. How are you?
Doing good. Doing good.
Good, good.
How are things back in Wilmington?
Oh, they're weird.
Well,
Yeah,
we don't have to
it
go
feels
into
very,
it.
very strange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, we don't have to go into that if you don't want to.
No, no, it's not anything one way or the other. I knew it would feel weird in some set of ways. I just didn't anticipate the specific set of ways in which it did feel weird.
Got you.
So, yep. Oh.
So I've been spending a few days, actually, pretty much since we got back,
Hmm.
building up a spreadsheet full of possible places to play all over the country. Like I've
Fuck yeah.
been looking in different DIY groups and then hunting down events that were hosted in the past and like looking up the places that they're listed on them and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
So hopefully we can use that in the future.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
that actually sounds generally helpful.
so
Oh,
just so you know, I'm recording this.
cool,
Um,
cool.
it'll be transcribed. It's different talking to you in these circumstances. it's, it's
Yeah, right.
it's I almost know you too well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, honestly, if you were like, I'm going to synthesize an interview with Austin in my head
Uh
and
huh.
just write what I think he would say if I asked him this,
Yeah.
I'd probably be completely fine with it. Like I suspect you would like basically just get it.
so all right, let's start here.
Yeah.
Start with some stuff I don't know that I'm interested in. How old were you when you started playing on an instrument?
Um, five, four, somewhere in there.
And what was it?
It was piano.
What
Yeah.
what did they have you playing?
They didn't really have me playing anything. My mom found, I think it was at a garage sale, found just like an old little Casio. And I think she paid like $1 for it and just thought it would be a funny thing to give me.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, I know actually when I was in preschool, they had like a little toy piano, just there at the preschool. And I like would just hog it and kind of get in trouble for like spending all day at that. And they're like, you should let someone else play it. And then I'd leave and no one else would want to play it. And then they'd be like, well, okay, you can just do that all day. And so I think my mom found me a little Casio and yeah, started like playing around on that thing.
Right. So
Nope.
so you started out pretty much just exploring the instrument freely.
Yeah, just like playing some notes. Eventually, my mom taught me because she did piano lessons when she was younger, and she taught me like some of the standard like goofy things that you learn on piano, like heart and soul and chopsticks and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, that's how you play those. And then yeah, me and my dad would like ride around town, and I'd like listen to the radio and come back and play it on the Casio. And then my dad was like, wait, how did you know how that went? And I was like, I don't know. Doesn't everybody do that?
So it came very naturally to you.
Yeah, yeah.
Um. Well, did you play any music in school?
Yeah, when I went to middle school, I was in band, and that's when I learned to play saxophone, and that's how I learned to read music and everything.
Right.
And then did that through middle school and high school. And then while I was in high school, I wanted to write a lot for like string orchestra and string quartet and that kind of thing.
Mm.
And but wanted to make sure that whatever I was writing was possible. So I got me a little $20 violin on eBay. My mom helped me get it, and so learned how to do that, and then eventually got a cello to figure out the like fingerings and everything on that. And so yeah, I was never great at playing either, but I would have them around just so if I wrote something, I could check to see whether or not it was like doable.
Mm. Um, do you mentioned your mother both times? Does your mother have a musical influence on you?
Yeah, for sure. She was always involved in the church and always singing in the choir. And she took piano lessons when she was young, and I think she played flute in the band. And and yeah, she's a singer. She's doing the band that she made the artwork for recently.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So which is honestly weird. Like normally she doesn't do any secular music. She's always been much more about church music for the most part.
It is.
And so yeah, that's odd for her.
It was weird for me too, painting it for my friend's very good friend's mother. It had a different.
Yeah, no, I imagine that's really strange.
I enjoy the distance that usually comes with like someone living in a different city or something asking for it.
Yeah, yep.
But I got it done.
Yeah, she was happy with it though.
Okay,
so,
good.
Yeah, yep, no complaints.
So, how old were you when you started, composing your own music?
I don't really know when I started like coming up with stuff because it was kind of just how I was introduced to it. But I know I at least started writing stuff down when I was like, I don't know, maybe how old are you in sixth grade? It was as soon as I learned how to like read and write music that I started actually writing down the stuff I had in mind. And then prior to that, I definitely had pieces that went a certain way, but they were never notated. So yeah, probably around the like near when my parents divorced, a little before, a little after, like all kind of fuzzy. So maybe around like 9-ish, 9, 10.
Did you spend a lot of time by yourself as a kid?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was like I think that was in my life the most time that I've spent by myself was my childhood.
Mm.
All the way into like high school. And then I don't think I became social until until I lost my faith in college.
You went looking for other people to talk to.
Yeah, I just had a hard time talking with people. I could never really figure it out.
Well, do you think that helped you? Did that result in you like being more wrapped up in your imagination?
Yeah, I was definitely thinking about music all the time while I was alone, and I would spend a whole lot of time just reading the Bible and studying that kind of thing by myself. So it was definitely music and religion were the most important things for me through all my childhood. I did martial arts and took that really seriously for a long time, just for like physical therapy purposes.
Right.
And had a few other things, got into archery and that sort of stuff. But it was mostly just like music and religion the whole time.
I feel that.
Yeah.
You
right?
said you had physical therapy. Do you mind talking about that?
Yeah, I've got like some weird thing with my nervous system, and nobody quite knows what it is. But it's yeah, like similar to cerebral palsy and similar to Parkinson's. And then I just didn't move very well, and I couldn't really see very well as a kid, and everybody noticed. And yeah, so like I come from enough privilege that my patrilineal grandfather, he owns a mill, and so they had like some money there. And then everybody kind of like pitched in some money and got me like physical and occupational and visual therapy for yeah most of my childhood. And then once I like graduated out of the physical therapy part of it, they told me I could either do ballet or martial arts. And then being acculturated as a little boy, I was like, well, I'm not supposed to do ballet, so I did martial arts for about a decade or so, and you know, kept myself in check and learned how to move.
Nice.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it used to be silly trying to like go upstairs, or like they put me in soccer, and soccer was just me chasing a group of people because I couldn't run right. And so there was the group of people with the ball, and then I'm trailing behind, and then they turn around and I just turn around and like, yeah, I didn't really like engage with the game. I just ran back and forth across the field after everybody else the whole time.
Yeah. Man, Do you ever think about keeping that up again? The martial arts?
No, I like it was a really big part of my life and like really like kind of I don't know, it was like a lot of discipline and something I did multiple times a week, like just going to class. So I think about it somewhat often, and definitely just on a day-to-day basis, I'm generally thinking about how I'm moving, or I try to be if I'm not drunk. And yeah, and so yeah, I try to pay attention to how I move, and it just always reminds me of stuff from physical therapy and martial arts and all of that stuff growing up.
Do you think that experience shaped your attitudes in your life in a way that maybe it forced you to consider things that a more typical kid wouldn't have to consider?
Yeah, well, I think it meant that like a lot of the things that would have been more natural or compulsive, like at the risk of sounding conceited, like uh, I think it forced me into like a default of being deliberate. And so, yeah, generally like, just getting up from a chair and walking, from one room to another or whatever. I'm like pretty actively putting thought into that. And it wasn't until college that I really realized that generally walking is not something people put a whole lot of thought into.
True.
It's like a more natural thing to do. And it's like, yeah, I'm gonna fall over if I don't think about it. So
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. Do you think that
so
that
yeah, I think
deliberation affects music and the way you approach music?
yeah, I think that's I mean it's kind of my policy honestly with anything I'd be willing to compose, and improvising's maybe a little different, but with a composition, if I was playing through something, I'd like to think that if anyone hit pause at any point and they said like, why did you do that? Like I would already have like an explanation as to like why I picked one note over another.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Now, when did you begin the process of recording your music?
Well, I think so. When I was in college, definitely had to just do a bunch of performances that happened to be recorded. So whatever exam, whatever piece I was doing for that semester, it was usually two or three pieces in a semester. They'd record, and then in 2010, my friend Andrew Weathers, who runs Full Spectrum Records, which is dissolved as of yesterday, I believe.
Aw,
But yeah, it had a good like 16-year run. But yeah, Andrew needed me to go, wanted me to go on tour with him, and so we did a big like 3 month and some change tour. And he wanted there to be more merch, and so I recorded a thing in maybe a week and a half or something like that at my house on Adams Street in Greensboro, and just use the program you use, Audacity, and just sat down and recorded, I think, like 9 tracks of something, and yeah, that felt pretty good. Like I did it all kind of in a rush because it was kind of short notice to make an album, but I was like, okay, I think I can come up with a thing in a week and a half, and yeah, working in Audacity was really nice. I'd done some of that for electronic music classes in previous semesters anyway, like learning about Karlheinz Stockhausen and music concrete and that whole tradition. And Audacity is really good for like chopping things up in a really granular way and manipulating them in ways that are akin to old school tape manipulation.
yeah, I agree.
Yep, yep.
So, so did you name that recording? Did it have a name?
Yeah, I called it Killing the Baker, which is what I used to perform under. It was a reference to Life of Pi, because I was good buddies with I'm still good buddies with Andrew, and Andrew's first project was called Pacific Before Tiger, which was a Life of Pi reference, and I hadn't read it, but I knew it was important enough to him to name his thing after it, so read it, and there was this character who was a baker, and kind of like the other half of another character in a strange way, and the other character is like a Marxist cold scientist like very materialist kind of guy. And then this baker is sort of a mystic. And yeah, at that point in life, I was like, no, I want to drive every bit of mysticism out of myself that I can.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I called it Killing the Baker.
Very good. Do you
Yeah.
feel that way still?
Yeah, I think I would use slightly different language for it now. Like I think there's a lot of stuff that definitely appears mystical and shouldn't be written off. And like it is fundamentally material, and there is some meaningful like causal sort of explanation for phenomena in the world. But like the chaos of these systems makes it so hard to understand that it might appear mystical, and then writing it off because of that appearance, we might be missing out on some really important bits of life.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't really feel mystical generally, but I try not to react so harshly towards things that when I was younger I would just say bullshit. I'm not listening.
Well, it's interesting because when you were even younger than that, you were very involved in religion.
Yeah, it was like kind of I think that's why I reacted that way, is it was like very much my entire worldview, and came to realize that there was like a real evil and a real cruelty built into viewing the world through, Christian scripture, but Abrahamic or like scripture in general. Like if you think you have the divine word of God and it's infallible, then you're setting up some kind of hard rule and some kind of hierarchy that that just never goes well, right? Like I greatly prefer something non-hierarchical.
Well, tell me how that line of thinking came across your path.
Ooh, I don't know. I remember like I was just like kind of a stereotypical sad, angsty teenager in like middle school and high school, and honestly didn't have many friends, and I would hear my dad complain very rightfully about like how work was treating him, and the cost of things, and just how business works and so on. And like my dad's not a socialist by any stretch of the imagination, but he like all of his complaints were the kinds of complaints that a socialist would make. And so yeah, I just started thinking a lot about like, I guess since I was alone and didn't have too many friends, I wasn't thinking about individuals as much. And I was just like, okay, what are these systems and these big broad things that I'm nominally a part of and kind of at the whim of these bigger things. And yeah, just I don't know, like ended up learning a little bit about some of the socialists and communists and anarchists and all the left wing political and economic traditions of the last few hundred years. And I don't know, for whatever reason, it was always really appealing to me, and I was always really into American history and liked Thomas Paine and that kind of, and like later learned Paine and Shelley, and those people were like pretty early what we call anarchists as far as the current tradition's concerned. Like there have always been anarchists, but yeah, and yeah, it's just always had something of an appeal to me, and it might come from me growing up Baptist, and the Baptists have a ton of history of being skeptical towards hierarchy and making the theology a very like personal sort of thing, but then also like having a strong group dynamic where together everyone can accomplish way more than they can apart. And you get that in the Pentecostals and a lot of the Protestant tradition.
Now, the Baptists, I don't know if all of them do. I guess this is more of a question, but don't some of them go as extreme as to say you have the ability to reject God if that's what you want to do? Like it's like like Arianism or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah, although they advise against it.
Yes, that's exactly right. Like, don't do that, but you could.
Okay, so tell me, are you working on anything musically now?
Yeah, I've got a show for Andy Lame here in Wilmington in January,
Oh yeah.
And so I'm putting together a band. Actually, I've made a few calls, and I think I'm going to have at least three, if not six people play with me,
Cool.
and that's really exciting.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to get at least, a string quartet or maybe string trio, and then I can fill in on whatever instrument's missing, and then one or two horns
Hmm.
and bass, and I might get a guitar player, or I might not. And then I got a friend who said he might play oud with me.
Oh wow.
So yeah. So I'm really not sure how to do it, but once I know what the instrumentation is going to be, I'm going to start writing up some arrangements of a few tunes, mostly tunes that are related to an EP that I'm working on.
Okay.
And I'm working on that kind of alongside a full-length album that I've been working on forever. And I'm just, you know, I'm bad at accomplishing anything in a timely manner. So I've got that album that I'm a little sick of because it's been more than a decade that I've been trying to get that thing knocked out.
What? Yeah, yeah. I remember you telling me about it a few years ago while I was living with you.
Yeah, yeah. That album is called Gastonia, and yeah, it's just about my hometown.
Is that why it's taking so long? It's because
Yeah, it's some of that, and then just I have yet to figure out what the right way to live is. Honestly, like how do you how do you give enough time to the relationships you care about, and then also to your work, so you have money to pay rent and buy food, and then sufficient time to like spend with yourself to do like the creative work that is self-directed
mhm.
and yeah, I'm still learning. I'm still trying to figure out how to like balance all of those things because I know I'm going to be profoundly unhappy if any of them go away.
Hmm. Right.
Yeah, it's like I need the people I love and who love me, and I need time alone to like do my own productive work, and then you got to eat, and it's good having a roof above your head. So you got to find a way to do that under this crazy private controlled thing that we do.
Are you speaking of which? Are you working back at the piano place?
So I don't know. I got to talk to him for a little bit. I'm hoping I get to, but it's all unclear. I think I've had three or four uh, job prospects that I've been thinking about while I was out of Wilmington, and I didn't want to put all of my hopes in any one of them.
Hmm.
So I was like, okay, I'm gonna have these like four different things that I know surely I can do one of them. And upon returning to Wilmington, it seems like maybe all of them have fallen through.
Oh
So
dang.
yeah, so I really gotta figure out what I'm doing for work.
Oh yeah. Okay, I could hear that.
Yeah, but I would love to work back at the piano shop if I can like set some good ground rules and
Right.
all of that. Yeah.
Well, because the actual job itself is not so bad. If
Yeah, no, a
removing
lot of
other
the job is
factors.
like really fulfilling.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It is nice to be able to work at something that at least is tangentially related to the thing you care the most about.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, like I think that's every job I ever have, I tend to think like there is some purpose and some like function in the thing that I'm doing.
Hmm.
And like a big part of satisfaction and work, I think is just its necessity. So if like it makes sense that like this is helping someone somewhere somehow, then it's not entirely alienating and terrible to do. But it's when it's mitigated by like a profit motive and all of that sort of thing. And then like I've definitely had jobs that didn't need to exist. Like I used to put cotton swabs in envelopes, and that was the job. You just put cotton swabs in envelopes, and it was like the most ridiculous thing I think I've spent my time doing.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, it was for a paternity test, and so they would just be an envelope shipped out to a doctor, and so he could swab the inside of somebody's cheek. And it's like I'm sure a doctor could just have swabs on hand, like.
Right. That seems like make work sort of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And honestly, I suspect the place was some weird sort of a front or something, because there was a lot of weird and not entirely legal stuff going on in that space.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not trying to do investigative journalism, but
Yeah, yeah, no, no.
what's anything in particular?
Well, we were doing it in what was a paper warehouse. And that was like the main job that I got hired for is one paper company bought another paper company. And so we were like shifting around all of the like scaffolding and just all their hardware that they used to store the paper. And then so we ended up just taking a bunch of stuff to the scrapyard. And then once that was done, uh, they had just an extra room with about 15 people, all of whom would just put cotton swabs in envelopes. And it wasn't like a sterile environment the way it's supposed to be for medical stuff.
Oh no.
And yeah, and it was just like running out of the back of this paper shop and or paper warehouse. And so like I got hired to do paper related stuff, did a little bit of that. I guess they didn't like me, and so then they put me in the room with people putting cotton
Oh
swabs in
Jesus
envelopes.
Christ.
And then yeah, I talked to some people who had been doing that job, the cotton swabs and envelopes, for more than a decade. Like I think someone told me they've been doing it for like 14 years. And,
That sounds like
and
George
yeah,
Orwell and Philip K. Dick would write a short story together about that. And
yeah,
that's
yeah. It was truly disturbing, and like not even to judge this human being, but just to think about like the potential of in any given person. And it's like we should not reduce anyone to
right.
putting cotton swabs in envelopes. And it was an 8-hour shift
Yeah.
and 5 days a week, and they've been doing it for 15 years.
Okay,
And
that's absolutely something a machine should do if it's actually necessary at all.
yeah,
Like just
yeah,
have the
and
machine do it.
it's not even an important thing to be done. And and so yeah, I just decided like, well, I'm just gonna hang out. I'm just gonna like go to the bathroom and walk around and like take a break and like I'll go and put like a cotton swab in an envelope every once in a while, but like I'm just gonna hang out until they fire me, because like so long as I'm getting paid, I might as well like walk around and like take money from whatever this stupid institution is. And and yeah, and that's what I did. I think how old was I? I would have been like 21, maybe something like that.
Is that Greensboro?
No, that was in
Okay,
Gastonia. I was back for like, oh wait, I may have even been doing that when I moved back to Gastonia from Greensboro after I met Emily.
Okay.
I think that is when I was doing that. That was my first job, and it lasted all of like a month before I got fired. And yeah, which was great. And
It's
yeah,
always
so
nice
I
when
think
you
I would have
want to
been
be
like
fired.
22 or 23, something like that.
Yeah. No responsibilities.
Yeah.
Why work at the fucking
Yep.
earwax cleaner in an
Right.
envelope place?
Right. Right. It's like gibberish.
Oh, that's very dystopian. Um,
Yeah, truly.
well, I know you just got back to Wilmington for the first time in a long while, like on a permanent
Yeah.
basis.
Yeah.
Um, do you feel like you've learned anything about yourself in your experiment away?
Yeah. Yeah. I think boy, I think I've learned a whole lot of things, and none of them were things I was looking to learn a different set of things, and those are
Oh,
still like open questions.
right.
But I definitely did learn a bunch of stuff. It would be hard to put concisely, honestly,
I see.
but yeah, I can. I
You,
know. I think I know more clearly the things that I want and that make me happy.
I see.
And yeah, and there is a pace of life that seems possible, and
Yeah.
there's an amount of creative work that actually seems possible.
Right.
And prior to leaving, it felt more insurmountable.
Okay.
So I felt guilty like even entertaining the idea,
Right.
but having left and come back and like feeling just the vibes of the way I have constructed my life historically,
Yeah.
it's obvious that there are other ways of putting things together where I could have more time to actually be creative and to have more substantive communion with my fellow human being and like all the good stuff that I want.
Right, right. Well, that's good.
Yeah, no, it's a net positive for sure.
And how what about the tour? I mean, we went on the tour
Oh, the
together.
tour was great.
I thought it was. It was it
Yeah,
was it was
tour was
something.
lovely.
I thought it went really well. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like. I know I always say it, but I really love Laramie, and I think you're brilliant for looking at that part of the country.
Yeah,
Because I
absolutely.
wouldn't have thought about like southeastern Wyoming. Like, like I've been out there before, but it never occurred to me like that would be a good place to like set up shop.
For
But
sure.
hanging around there, it's like it's somewhat self-evident that that could work really well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's within 2 hours of Denver, which is like that's like
Yep,
it's a big
yep,
city. So
yeah,
like
absolutely.
even though it's the most rural state in the
Yeah,
country,
yeah,
it's not that part of it isn't as like you're abandoned to living on
yeah,
a lonely
for sure.
mountain.
And then Laramie itself is like they've got the university and everything,
Right,
so
right.
like it's not like it's nothing.
No, not at all. It's a decent
And
sized
then
town.
Cheyenne's right there, I think, if my memory serves me.
Yeah.
And like Cheyenne's something.
Cheyenne's the biggest city, if you want to call it that, in Wyoming. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's probably a
Yeah,
little
by
smaller
Wyoming
than Greenville.
standards.
It's probably a
Yeah.
little smaller than Greenville, but it's
Yep.
it's as far as Wyoming goes, it's got stuff.
Yeah.
But
No, it makes me think of Little Rock, Arkansas. I think
right,
Little Rock's basically like Wilmington or maybe Winston-Salem or
yeah,
a smaller city, but is still a city in North Carolina. But then by Arkansas standards, it's like that is the
yeah,
city.
exactly. That's the one,
Yep.
and it was quite a city. Arkansas was great.
Yeah, I loved everything about Arkansas, honestly.
Yeah, I did too. I
Not
was
a bad time.
pleasantly surprised. I enjoyed it.
Yep. Yep.
Well, I know I'm missing a lot of information here,
Cool.
and it's just trying to find the exact way to pry it out of your skull
Yeah.
by consent.
As directly as you need to ask anything. I'm bad at like offering up information, but anything I'm asked, I can try to answer.
Well, what I want to understand more about you is specifically related to how you think about music, like how you break it down in your mind and how you put it back together in your mind, and so your
Yeah.
approach in general. Because I know you have an approach uh, that's thoughtful
Yeah.
and that's considered, and so
Cool.
I would like to hear more about that.
Yeah, I guess on a like listening level. So if I'm performing or just listening to some work of music, but I'm in a space where I need to be able to hear. I'm like really interested in physics, and I tend to think of resonance and wavelengths, and I'll spend a lot of time playing with like a lambda or whatever, like calculating the wavelength and then the different partials that I can hear off of something. And so I'm one of the obnoxious, like absolutely obsessed with the harmonic series kind of people. And and yeah, any like theoretical model that I use to understand something I'm listening to, I try to make it rooted in physics first, and then develop a historical understanding of whatever tradition it's growing out of. So I really like ethnomusicology. It's like pretty important to the way I listen to and understand music, but it's sort of the superstructure over the like material structure of the harmonic series and just standard sound physics.
Like, do you find yourself when no one's around and you're playing?
Hmm.
What is that like?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time trying to listen to the room, and whatever instrument I have, I spend a lot of time trying to get its tone or its tuning or whatever it is dialed into the space where I am. And I like to just find weird little sympathies around a room and see how things like to ring. And then depending on what it is I'm in the mood for, like I do counterpoint exercises every day, and I try to improvise something in 2 or 3 or 4 part counterpoint at least for 20 minutes every day. And usually that's internal and not actively sonic. But then if I am alone and I pick up a guitar or my saxophone, or I'm just singing by myself, and then if I'm lucky enough to be around a piano or an organ or something, yeah, I really like counterpoint exercises, which that's its own old school Baroque and Renaissance sort of tradition. But I really love blues and really love different forms of like heterophony and like old American folk music and religious music. And so I don't necessarily make a point to emphasize one thing over the other, but as if I hear something and it reminds me of like, oh yeah, the old regular Baptists do this kind of thing periodically, or like the Carpathian region of Georgia, like East Georgian polyphonic scene, they'll do this kind of thing, and so I'll just like let something remind me of some tradition I'm familiar with, and then kind of roll with it with that theoretical framework from that tradition.
Okay. And so when you're playing with someone else, do you try to kind of reverse engineer what you feel like they are closest in tradition to?
Yeah, I try to do both. I'll like feel out whatever tradition they're doing, and I'll try to pick up on like cognates, like a little bit of a musical idea that is related to a tradition I know, but I don't necessarily think they're paying attention to explicitly. And then I'll see if I can bring out more of that related tradition so that it gives like some variety, but it's not disconnected. Like they're all the cognates that sort of blend the different traditions.
And that applies to basically anyone you would play with, right? Even though they're
Yeah,
the tradition that they have, or that you're perceiving that they're playing closest to, is
yeah,
different depending on the person or
yeah,
set of traditions.
absolutely. Yep.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
so how does that? How does all that become tethered to your approach to personal composition?
Yeah, I tend to want, so there's all of that always going around, and it could get overwhelming to like spew those kinds of ideas onto anyone at a given moment. And so normally when I'm composing, I want the composition to be a set of directions to the composition itself. So that if anyone ever listened to it and they ask like, well, how did Austin compose this? The answer would come from listening to the piece.
Okay.
So I want it to be like straightforward enough in process that it could maybe inspire someone to make another thing if they were interested enough to ask, like, well, how was that made? And it's like, well, just listen to it, and it should avail itself. And I don't always do that successfully, but that's what I always shoot for.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So, I guess on a more granular scale, do you have a good idea of the traditions that you are swimming in? Like, do you know which ones you tend to pull personally in the case
Yeah, I
that
try, but
others aren't involved, or that they're
yeah,
involved as a afterthought to your composition?
yeah, yeah. It's like the interplay between different musical traditions is such that I don't think any of us could ever be fully aware of all the things influencing us.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I know like very explicitly I come out of like a lot of Appalachian folk tradition, and I've studied the Western classical tradition a lot. And yeah, between those two things, that's like the majority of what kind of moves me and what I feel like I'm moving through. And then there's all the pop music and rock music or what have you. But I usually think of those as just new iterations of the same synthesis between what's considered American folk music and the Western classical tradition. And then American folk music is so highly composed of like traditional African music and a lot of like indigenous musics, and then a lot of little folk traditions from around Europe. And yeah, they're all kind of blended in a unique, well, not a single unique way. Like different regions of the country have different things going on. But yeah, that's all there. And then we have the like monolith of the, Bach, Mozart, Beethoven classical tradition. And yeah, that's usually the where my ear is tuned. But I'll make a point to pay more attention to like Makam or like Sardinian canto a tenore or Georgian polyphonic singing or sometimes like Chinese opera and yeah, just different ways of making music. I'll spend 2 or 3 years of my life really trying to like get it and listen as much as I can and read as much as I can to understand where those different traditions are coming from and not just imposing my own like Western notion of how music works on those traditions. But that's hard. You train your ear to hear things a certain way, and it takes time to hear things on another culture's terms when you're not brought up in it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I do my best to come up with a bunch of different ways of being able to hear music. And then I feel like the thing we all have in common is going to be the sound physics, which is why I always kind of start with that.
Now,
Because yeah, those physics are kind of independent of tradition.
Where does how can I rephrase this? Where does classical music end for you? Like, do you consider
Yeah,
Stockhausen to be classical?
yeah, I think generally, so like people are going to use the word differently, and so it depends on the context that the conversation's happening.
Right.
But yeah, I tend to think of like maybe three general sorts of music, where you have classical music, where there is like an exalted set of performers and composers, and they are on a stage, either literally or proverbially, on some sort of stage and separate from the audience, and they're making art that is to be received by the audience. And so the act of being an audience member is an act of absorption, and
right.
Like you sit back and you assume that the composer and the performer knows something that you don't, and so you want to like take it in from them, and like yeah, whatever the magic thing is that they know, you'll get it from like listening to it, and you'll get to experience that thing. And then on the other end, there's folk music, where basically anyone's allowed to participate at any time, and the setting and often the lack of a stage is every bit as much a part of the music as the actual notes. And there's a much more direct communion between like audience and performer and composer. And then often the composer is not even known, because whoever's around can just alter things as they see fit, and they say, well, I like it when it goes this way, so I'm going to play it like this. And so there's not this reverence for the composer. And then pop music is the category that's kind of uncanny, and where you have like something coming out of the sort of a folk tradition and sort of a classical tradition, and people are allowed to sing along. Like if you're driving in the car, you can sing along with the radio, or if you go to the rock concert, you can sing along with the people on stage. But there's still a stage, and the name of the composer, the name of the band, and there's like money still flowing a certain direction towards like an exalted set of musicians. And like even though we're allowed to participate, we're still just the audience.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a weird synthesis of the two extremes.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, I guess, where does religious music fit in that?
Yeah, that's I think that's kind of the proto-pop music. Is like you have this highfalutin classical tradition, and it's supposed to be, as pristine as possible, so as to glorify God. But then it's also like with the Protestant Reformation, especially, like it's supposed to get into you and like influence you on a personal level.
Mm-hmm.
And so you still have the performers up in the choir and the music instruments on the stage, but like everyone's having their own like really big religious experience together. So there's still the communion in it, but like you also get the exalted things.
Right. Yeah, I think about that with the Pentecostal church that I was a part of for a long time. Very different from the Unitarian church that I was a part of for long time.
Yeah, I believe it.
Unitarian church's music, I'm just going to say, sucked, and I'm going to move on from there.
Yep.
The Pentecostal
No, it's true.
church, the music was amazing.
Yep.
Best
Yep.
part of the
They know
whole,
what they're doing.
what I would call a performance, best part of the performance. But like,
Yeah.
but it does share that it is exalted. It's not exalted in the sense, maybe it's not a god, but it's a demigod. You know what I mean? Like, it's like,
Yeah.
it's getting you there, but
Yep.
they're not. It's, unless you're in a cult, you shouldn't have the musical director's face in a giant painting behind the pulpit or something like that.
Yeah.
But
Right.
but it does direct you towards divinity,
Mm-hmm.
and but it also has the folk music aspect that you were talking about of being
Right.
directly accessible and sung along to and clapped and in some places danced.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
and there is a monetary aspect to it as well.
For sure.
Although
sure.
some of that money flows in the opposite direction sometimes.
Right. Right. Depends on the church and the time period and all
Right.
those things.
So
Yep.
it's I hate to put it in these terms, but it's the pop art is sort of more purely materialistic, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's honestly, I think in so many ways, it's just not the case. And you can talk about the history of the GOP and all of the last 50 years, but yeah, there's a way in which the United States has become more secular, and I think pop music is just a synthesis of all the same ingredients as the religious music we were making, 80, 100 years ago, but just with the superstructural ideology more explicit. And so it does become more material and more garish, and you see that in the history of rock and roll. Like, you start with blues coming from, pretty downtrodden, like the proletariat.
Yeah.
And then by the 80s, you get glam rock, and there's this whole
Right.
gradual transition into like this very personal, often alone. Like, so much of blues history is like, you're not supposed to perform that for people. You play that for yourself to like work something out. And then it turns out you can make money off of that. And so you give it, the better part of a century, and then it just becomes a cash grab.
Yeah, and at least with, how I feel about religion, but at least with the religious music,
Mm-hmm.
most of the time it tries to point towards some kind of ideal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas most pop music has completely released itself
Well,
from
I think
that.
it's a different set of ideals, honestly. Like, I think, like, if we're talking about glam or hair metal or whatever it is, there is a sort of opulent but also like kind of defiant. Like, I live in this like crazy capitalist world, and I
Right.
got to make my own way. And there's like a lot of individualism in it, and a lot of it can be super empowering.
That's true.
But I think it's often kind of a con. It's a way to feel empowered without challenging those systems. It's like a weird coping mechanism, which ultimately is what all that church music was too.
And it's an aesthetic rebellion without being a material rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
which
And
the
those
church
are my feelings on the Protestant Reformation. So,
it's kind of, well, that's interesting. That's interesting.
yeah. Yeah.
That's an interesting point. But like with the church music, if I take it for what it claims to be, how about that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's not really rebellious at all.
Yeah.
It's more about instilling a sense of glory for the sake of reinforcing authority.
Yeah.
Whereas the pop music is more like, you are the best that there could ever be, but you have to give us money to hear that.
Yeah.
It's like a different a different emphasis of chicanery.
Yeah. Yeah. Which there's also, there's especially on the Protestant end of it, there's the empowerment people get out of like inviting the Holy Spirit into them, and they feel like they have God on the main line. and like, yeah, there is that sort of like being puffed up. And then the ideals of like, you turn on the radio and people are singing about love and heartbreak
True.
and like work and just the pains of, and like those are real ideals, and like real stuff is in there. and you know, people can really aspire to like live a better life by certain standards and values that are, you know, they find camaraderie with an artist or
Well, it's
solidarity,
relatable.
saying like, oh yeah, I felt exactly like that when I went through this thing in my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so yeah, I think everybody's got like ideals they're shooting at, but the pop music is in a way a little more perverse because it's taking something that claims to be more human and is purely about capital. Whereas the religious music is there to reinforce all the ideology of capital and everything. But I do think the participants, like the people making the music, really think they're there to glorify God, to a degree that at least the music industry, I don't think the music industry really cares about love or I feel downtrodden or heartbroken or any of that. It's like
No.
maybe the individual artists do, but they just get co-opted.
And it's more overtly transactional. Because
Yeah,
like
yeah.
now if you go to a church more than once, you're gonna be leaned on. There's no question.
Mm-hmm.
But they're never, to my knowledge, this would be funny to me because it'd be great performance art. But to my knowledge,
Yep.
there isn't a church that's like, if you want us to pray for you, you have to give us $5. Like
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
first,
that's kind of what the Reformation started over is like people selling like salvation, more or less.
right, right, right.
And it's like, no, you can't do that.
That's
If
a
you come
little
out
too.
and say it, people are going to get upset.
Yeah, that's a little too obvious. That's a little too
Yep.
obvious of a grift.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Well, what's on your horizon? You got anything planned?
Yeah, I've got the show with you at the end of this month, and I'm really excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I've got Andy Lane's show coming up in January. And then depending on the pace at which I can get the band together and rehearsed, I might actually play with a few other people when I come over to your place
Oh, great.
at the end of the year. Yeah.
Yep.
And yeah, just looking for work, working on an EP, getting the band together, and then at some point finishing the big album if I can get my life in a sort of stable, productive rhythm. Then I really want to go back. I don't want to try it independent of having some amount of stability because I know exactly how frustrating it's been the last decade just trying to force it to happen.
Right, right.
Yep.
I mean, I'm looking forward to hearing it whenever it does get done.
Yeah, when I bet you'll live long enough. It's like on the line,
There's
but
a
I
lot
bet you'll make it.
There's a lot of factors in play here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of factors in play here.
Yeah, if I live long enough to make it, I bet you'll live long enough to hear it.
Okay, I could take that kind of bargain.
Yeah.
Well, as always, it was lovely. That was a great conversation.
Yeah. Love you so much. It's always like really, really good talking and hanging, and that was a great tour, and I'm excited to see you in less than a month.
I love you too, and I hope everyone goes and finds more about your music.
Yeah, that sounds great.
You have a great night.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye.